Welcome to the Just Build It podcast. I am your host, Jeff Dangelo. This is our second podcast. The first one was actually in the basement of my house. We have a new studio. It's at Cohatch. Cohatch is a competitor of WeWork, and they have a really cool studio in house where the lights are great, the inside is great, and we're excited to sort of get started. You see me with my Bengals jersey, and there's a reason. We have an amazing guest today who's from Detroit. So we're going to talk a little bit about Detroit sports. He lives in the Chicago area now. So we're going to talk about Detroit versus Chicago. He's a founder of a company called ScrapGo. He's founder and CEO, and they're trying to revolutionize or reinvent an old industry. And that's what Just Build It's all about. It's about how do we, as builders, how do we as technologists, how do we as entrepreneurs go into an industry or start companies that sort of revolutionize industries. So what do we learn? What are the barriers? What do people have to think about? And so I'm really excited about that. A little bit about my background. If you haven't listened to the first one, I've spent 22 years in logistics and technology, early employee at TQL, first employee at Megacorp, founded Turvo, a software company. It's probably 5 years ahead of schedule in terms of when you start a company in an industry, timing is the most important thing. And that sold last year to Lineage Logistics. And now I am the CRO and Chief Impact Officer of a company called Fura, which is trying to revolutionizing the logistics industry through M&A, but also through technology. So our background is technology. Here on the show, we've got Dale Turken. And Dale, like I said, is the founder CEO of ScrapGo. So Dale, love that you're on. Thanks for coming and joining me. We're going to have a great show today, talk about all things ScrapGo, all things Dale, all things Detroit. And we're also going to talk about AI and sort of the revolutionary technologies that are out there that are going to help you sort of revolutionize that space. So Dale, why don't you intro yourself to the audience? And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I don't have the grand introduction plan here, but like you said, my name is Dale Turken. My company is called ScrapGo. We are a scrap trading firm, and we are looking to add some technology to the business to make it more efficient for players to compete at a level that they have not been able to do so previously. Scrap is a very big industry. We focus on scrap metal. We have done some deals in paper, plastic, and electronics as well, but right now our focus is on scrap metal and moving it from point A to point B. We work with one of your companies, AOK Freight, and they do a great job for us moving our freight. But the way that I got into scrap was kind of a roundabout way. Had a business partner at the time whose family was in scrap for a long time, and I thought it always sounded interesting. And being in financial services for as long as I was looking for a change. And figured I'd give this a try, and here we are today.
So Dale, one of the first people I've ever talked to that said scrap was an interesting industry. But actually, what most people don't realize is every industry can be interesting in a variety of ways, right? And so let's go back a little bit. So Dale, we'll hear more. I'll ask a bunch of questions about ScrapGo and the industry and all these things. Let's talk about the jersey that you're wearing today, and talk about your origin in Detroit. You live in Chicago. There's, if you're talking about football, like you guys are always competing, Chicago, Detroit. So let's talk about your fascination with Detroit sports and growing up in that area.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's pretty easy to love my teams growing up. I mean, you got superstars like Steve Yzerman, Barry Sanders, the '84 Tigers, Isaiah Thomas and the Bad Boys. I mean, It was real easy growing up. And it stuck with me. I mean, I've lived in Chicago for more than half my life, but, old habits die hard.
So everyone wants to talk about who's the greatest ever in certain sports, right? So I'm not from Detroit. I'm a big Cincinnati guy, as you can see with my Joe Burrow jersey. We finally have a reason to get excited about sports in
Oh,
Cincinnati.
you do.
Holy cow.
You do. How about in Detroit?
FC. That's right. So Bengals, Reds, FC Cincinnati, which is a soccer club. We're actually becoming soccer fans, which is crazy. But when people talk about the greatest of all time, and people want to talk younger people, anyone under, I would say 35 or 40 years old, are going to talk about this generation, or like think about basketball. People are like, oh, LeBron James is the best ever. Jordan, hands down. When it comes to football, the greatest running back I've ever seen is Barry Sanders. Talk to us about growing up watching folks like Barry Sanders and sort of how that put Detroit on the map.
Well, Barry Sanders is in a league of his own. I mean, the greatest of all time is kind of an understatement. He only played 10 years, and I think he's still in the top 5 of rushing all time. The guy averaged 1,500, 1,600 yards rushing every single year. Unstoppable. Carried the Lions to the NFC Championship in 1991, which was coincidentally their last playoff victory. So we're hoping to change that.
And the worst line ever. The worst offensive line in the league every single year. It's not like Dallas. Remember, Dallas had Emmitt Smith, and you could literally drive a truck through every single line that when Emmitt Smith ran the ball, right? Like you could literally do that. Barry Sanders had nothing. Everybody was always in the backfield, and he would still get out.
Well, it's funny to hear someone who's not a Detroit fan actually take that position, because typically it's always like Emmitt Smith, and he was a great player, but Barry Sanders was something else.
Yeah, he was the best. So in Detroit, when did you end up moving to Chicago?
I moved to Chicago after college and my mid-20s, and came out here for a job. I was working in the mortgage business at the time, and I lived downtown, suburban boy living in the city. It was a great time, and Chicago stuck with me. I'm raising kids here, and we live in the city, about a mile west of Wrigley Field, which is a place that we spend a lot of time, especially now. Especially that series last week against the Reds, they took 3 out of 4. But we're not going to talk about that right now.
Who's counting? So the Reds were in first place in the NL Central. Now this happens every year with the Reds, so it doesn't surprise me. The Reds always do good the first half of the year. In the second half of the year, they never have great pitching. Like, everyone gets bored. The dog days of summer hit, and guys can't hit. Like, we've got a guy named Ellie De La Cruz. I've been to 3 games. He's 1 for 12.
I saw him.
We've lost 3 times.
I saw him strike out like 6 at-bats in a row before he finally got a hit.
That's right.
Yeah. He's a great
but he's
player.
Still, like, Cincinnati loves him. Yeah. Cincinnati loves him. And so you moved to Chicago. How'd you get started? So you started in the mortgage business. What made you, what inspired you to become an entrepreneur?
So when I was in college, my brother and I had a small business. It was we were selling carpet to freshmen at universities. I had a relative that was in that business, and he helped us get into it. And it was fun because we could work with all of our friends. We had like installation for carpet in the dorm rooms. It was a good time, and we made a little bit of money, and that started the feeling that I wanted to do something on my own. But I figured I needed some experience, so I went into the working world and tried my hand at a few things. I really was able to excel in sales. and identifying with people and, experienced some success. And then we started our own mortgage banking operation, which had some success. And then the economy sort of derailed that. And I just kind of turned those cards and keys back in and tried my hat in scrap. And, nobody really goes to school and thinks, hey, I want to be in the scrap business. I mean, unless your family's in it. It's typically a generational type business. But, I saw that there was an opportunity. It's a highly localized business. I felt like adding some technology to the business to make it more efficient for players to operate on a different level would be something that would be well received by the market. I think we were ahead of our time, but now we're kind of in that time where technology is being used and applied, and we're right there applying it.
And so when for the listeners that maybe have never built a company before, when you start a company, you want to answer some big questions. Some of the questions are, how big is the market, right? What's the size of the market? The second question you might answer is, what are the problems that are in the market that you want to solve? And how are you going to potentially solve them? The third, which all investors will ask, is why now? Like, what are the, like, why would you start a scrap business now versus 5 years ago or 10 years from now, right? And I'd love to hear it from you, Dale. Like, the scrap industry you mentioned generational, and generational has a connotation that there's not a lot of innovation, right? It's a lot of this is sort of, hey, my dad owned the company, or my dad started the company, or my grandfather started the company, and I have a great life now because they started that company, and I'm just going to take it over, right? A lot of people grow up that way, but not a lot of people grow up to say, hey, whatever they built, I don't care, right? Because the industry has to be different, and the company has to be different, and we have to make it easier for customers and name your favorite partner to work with us or to change or solve things that they have. So maybe tell us a little bit about that journey for you. Why now? How big's the market? What are the things that when you stepped in and said, hey, scrap's interesting, what are the things that you wanted to change with scrap?
Sure. So the global scrap industry, I mean, kind of depending on who you ask, it has the potential to be $1 trillion industry. In the United States alone, there is a glut of scrap. I mean, we have so much scrap here in the United States because we're a consumer economy. We consume things like cell phones. We consume things like cars. We consume things like beer that's in aluminum cans, and aluminum is infinitely recyclable. So the generational businesses that, families have had for, a lot of times 100+ years, have served a purpose, whether it was in World War II, where people were going around picking up, scrap in the garbage heaps and bringing them to the scrapyard, and then those guys would process it according to the way that the steel mill could use it to build weapons or tanks or whatever, to now where scrap has become kind of like a global trade. It occupies a very important spot in our economy. We focus a lot on the auto business, auto salvage, cars, end-of-life vehicles. There are millions of cars that are produced every single year. And there are millions of cars that are dismantled and recycled every single year. So it creates a big opportunity. But the reason that we got into it was we saw, based on my experience and what I had found, that it's a highly localized business, meaning that people don't go beyond 20 miles to get their scrap or, or sell it. Transportation, as you know, is expensive, and people view scrap as a dirty business, like, the TV show has coined that phrase. But we found that there are players, the smaller players, were kind of, I don't want to say they're being taken advantage of, but they didn't have the same opportunities to really grow their businesses in ways that the established players did. The established players can cover more ground. They can process more scrap. They can put more scrap on the ground because they have more space, and they're better funded. So what we do is we allow the small guy to compete with the bigger guys. The bigger guys are out there throwing their weight around. They're processing a lot of scrap in terms of tonnage. They're selling a lot of scrap in terms of tonnage, and therefore they're commanding better prices. So what we do is we sell a lot of scrap in the market, and we purchase a lot of freight in the market. And the combination of those two things allow us to get a better price on freight and a better price on scrap, and we pass that along to the smaller players, and they're able to make more money on the work that they're currently doing, without really having to go out and do it themselves. We kind of allow them to grow quicker. At least that's the thought.
That's the idea. And the on the small guys, I guess, how has your business changed since you first started? Like, what are some of the things that you've learned through that through the last several years?
So, I know it's sort of cliche, but you learn a lot. You go through the school of hard knocks, and I took my lumps. I mean, people in scrap are experienced. There's a lot of people that have been doing it for their entire lives, and when they see someone new, it's like chum in the water. It's like the sharks start circling. Who wants to take advantage of you first? You run into some, people that you think you can trust, and it comes back to bite you. We initially did some international deals, and those did not go well. And after some reflection, you kind of look at it and say, all right, there's a ton of opportunity here in the United States, where if there's an issue, I can get in my car, hop on a plane, and go see someone. Whereas, if I'm sending a container load to China, like, am I really going to jump on a plane and go talk to someone who doesn't speak the same language and has a different culture? It wasn't what we wanted to do. We didn't have that experience. We didn't have that knowledge. And so therefore, we focus exclusively now on domestic trade. So it's dealing with people who are buying American scrap and making American finished products. And I think that that's important.
And when you go to see customers, what are some of the problems that they face? Like, what are the things you have to solve for them beyond, hey, how do I compete from a price perspective with the big guys?
Well, at the end of the day, it's all about the price, because the more that they make, it just drops more to their bottom line. The thing that they're dealing with now, specifically now, is the shortage of good help. And couple that with the rising costs of gasoline, and it creates a situation where, every dollar counts. So, there's a saying that I learned from someone in scrap that says most suppliers, the people that are processing scrap, they can never have enough cash, okay? And they can never have enough space, because the more scrap that you put on the ground and the more scrap that you sell, the more cash you're going to make. And just to continue that, doing it over and over again. They have other problems that being in a technology business that you wouldn't appreciate. I mean, you can understand them, but things like equipment. Always have to have somebody on staff to fix your equipment, manage your equipment, have extra parts, because that's really the lifeblood of the business. You talked earlier about kind of scrap being like a low tech sort of business, and it is from like the Web 3.0 technology that we're used to. But if you look at the equipment that people are using in these yards, they're using enormous cranes that are battery operated, that they're not gas guzzling cranes. They're using these shears that can cut through just about anything. This type of stuff wasn't available like 30 or 40 years ago. So the advances in technology in scrap are just in a different sort of manner than like what we're talking about to make our lives more efficient. But they help with a scrap yard to do their job faster, better, and cheaper.
Right.
The first time when I got into scrap and I visited a scrap yard for the first time, I was shocked because everyone was doing making deals over a fax machine. And that was like foreign to me. You're talking about like 8 years ago, right? And I was kind of astounded by it. But as you get into it, you see that the problems that they have in scrap are basic business problems that if they can eke out a little more margin and do a little more volume, it's going to go a long way for them.
Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned a couple things. One thing about just the price, and to me, price has always been one part of the equation: the cost of the scrap, the cost of the transportation, but also the cost of the people, right, and the time that it takes. What are some of the things that ScrapGo is doing to sort of help customers get their time back? Because for the audience, it sounds like ScrapGo is just very traditional sort of broker in the space to go buy and sell scrap. But at the end of the day, Dale and his team are trying to sort of change that through technology. So talk to us a little bit about your technology and what you're trying to do to solve those problems for customers.
So one of the things that is sort of innate in the scrap business is it's the quote unquote, this is who we deal with, right? So even though you have a great price, even though you are allowing a scrapyard to free up some resources and focus on doing what they're doing, they're just kind of set in their ways of working. They are dealing with buyers that they trust, that they know, that maybe their father dealt with, maybe their grandfather dealt with, and there's no reason to change. So people are resistant to change. What we're able to do with some of our technology is we're able to match up sellers, which would be a scrapyard, with new buyers that are not in their market. So typically, if they are delivering scrap to their local processor, they will use their own trucks, or they'll load one of the the local guys' trucks. But if they're using their own trucks, that really takes a guy out of the yard. So what we do is we hope to sort of supplement, I don't want to replace exactly what they're doing, but supplement their current process so that they can get some of their time back, and hopefully provide some value on that end.
So that's So I'm gonna come back to my second thing, but I want to hit on this a little bit. So what I've heard is that ScrapCo is actually taking an industry that has traditionally been local, traditionally been maybe even regional, right? All relationship based, and applying technology to expand, right? To expand the market, right? This is something that hasn't happened. So the technology is now expanding a market that's never been there. And for those that are on the line that don't know, scrap is actually not just prices are published publicly, like you can actually see prices, but they also fluctuate depending on the state, right? And they fluctuate depending on the state, and they fluctuate depending on the transportation cost going into that state, obviously. And so what Dale and I have talked about, not only in this but prior, is that the technology enables a marketplace concept to open up this industry so that more players can participate. And I think that's an interesting, sort of opportunity for ScrapGo to say, all right, now it's not just you have to worry about the person in Chicago because you're buying and selling in Chicago. Now you're worried about people in New Mexico and Florida and California, all these other states that are actually maybe they need the scrap more, or maybe the price is cheaper for scrap, or maybe and I think that makes it super interesting. I guess is that a true statement, false statement? Like, would you say there's more to it than that?
I mean, I think you hit the nail sort of on the head. What we use technology for in our case is to make ourselves more efficient in trading. Like we'll, aggregate supply, and we do that from two angles. The supply of the actual scrap, and we use that when we're trying to sell scrap, and then we aggregate that scrap in a different way for transportation to hopefully push down our cost a little bit, and then we eke out a little margin for us, and then hopefully we can provide real value to to our suppliers.
That's great. And the second point I was going to make that you mentioned was your start in this industry had to do with the fax machine, right? And every industry is going through some of this digital transformation concept. When I started in the business, it was 2002. You could argue it was earlier than that for some other jobs, but 2002, I joined a small company, around 25 employees, called Total Quality Logistics. And
Small,
I remember
little
Ken Oates
company.
and Ryan, yeah, little company now, right? 13 billion or something, offices everywhere. And there were two founders, both of which wildly successful. Kenny is probably the richest man in Ohio. And they have challenges like any other company. They've gotten big. But when we started, it was all fax machine. As a matter of fact, when we started using email, Kenny said, this is going to be a fad. Like, we're not going to use email anymore. Like, we're going to just continue faxing because no one's going to use this email thing.
Right.
And, things like, software that automates now, you have a bunch of really cool tools in our industry. I still think it's 20 years behind, and it's held back by the people. And it's something that you talked about, the scrap industry. People are the ones that are holding it back. But now you have these next generation of people. And I want to talk about the sort of similarities between scrap and logistics, where I come from, is that in logistics, you never had supply chain degrees or entrepreneurship degrees, right? You never had those things. And now they're everywhere. Penn State and Tennessee were some of the first, Michigan State. And now you have really smart people coming into this industry, Harvard, MIT, et cetera, on the tech side, and sort of coming into this old industry saying, you know what, there's a $1 trillion domestically we want to attack. And how do we sort of do that? And the problems are very simple, but they're held back by the people. And I think if people allowed this stuff to sort of change, then we would be at 20 years ahead. But there's just so much sort of friction between getting the human to not only understand the value, but also leverage the value and use it. I think in your industry, you have an interesting sort of culmination of the younger generation that's coming up, and it might be a second, third, or fourth generation company. I think they're starting to realize like they're going to fall behind because they are growing up in a world where they came from, they went to colleges, universities, where some of the owners didn't. They said, you know what, I've been in scrap my whole life, and that's where I'm going to stay. But these folks are looking at the market saying, someone's going to disrupt me, and how do I get ahead of it? So I think that's sort of, where we're going. I want to sort of add a little bit about, talk a little bit about the logistics side. I wouldn't, obviously that's my background. Companies like Fura or AOK, can you talk to us a little bit about how digitally enabled or tech enabled logistics companies are helping companies like yours, or what's the value beyond just price, or like, obviously price is important, but what are they doing differently that I think is important for customers like you or shippers like you, or even your clients, and what should we take away from this to say, okay, the next generation of logistics should look like X to help companies like ours?
Sure. I think, just to piggyback on what you said before, whereas, in the past, people were not focused so much on logistics. I mean, the same can be said for scrap. You don't really go to college to, think about like, oh, I'm dying to get into scrap. It's something that is like you just kind of, maybe it's in your family, and there's tons of people that have just come by it naturally. And there are some great businesses out there that are run by, second, third, fourth generation people that, they didn't need college. They just are smart. They really understand how to run a business, and they especially know how to run a scrap business. But at the same time, when I got into scrap, I thought that this business, given its size, its fragmentation, just really how it was so hyper local, I thought that it was ripe for technology. What I didn't anticipate was that there were like a ton of these companies where the succession plan skipped a generation. So the father that took it over from his father wanted to give it to his son, but his son decided that he wanted to go be an investment banker on Wall Street or something, or he wanted to be an entrepreneur, or he wanted to do something else. And so, we ran into a lot of people that, owners who, running a hell of a business, but at, in their 70s and 80s, and like, they don't, like, technology wasn't important to them, like getting the business to transition to the grandson was the goal, And so now what we're seeing this time is that there's more of the younger generation that are taking over businesses from their fathers, from their grandfathers, people in their 30s and 40s that appreciate technology and that have, they see that this is a real next step for this industry. So, to answer your question about transportation and, companies like AOK and Fura, I think most importantly, the thing that technology has done for us, and the takeaway that I would argue is probably the most important thing for us in working with companies like Fura and AOK, is the reliability. Okay, the thing that technology allows you to do that sticky notes and your memory just doesn't, is it allows you to keep all of the information in one place. We have a huge problem with independent truckers that it's just paperwork. Like, they can't. The drivers lose something, and then it's irrecoverable. It's fire drill after fire drill. Whereas your technology allows them to snap a photo at that very instant, upload it directly, and granted, there are some cases where things slip through the cracks, but it's few and far between. And knowing that. A truck is on time, or they're going to be late, or they got into an accident, or whatever, is very important, because timing is, in a lot of cases, the most important thing. You're trying to get a load in by the last day of the month, because pricing in scrap is going to shift from the 31st to the 1st. Well, being ahead of it if there's traffic, if there's an accident, if something else comes up is very important to know. And, that's something that technology will allow us to track.
Yeah, now that you say it, some things that come to mind. It's not just that the technology is leveraged by the logistics company. It's actually important that it's also leveraged by the other parties involved, including someone like ScrapGo, right? Where you get notified in real time, or these scenarios. It's not just about a human calling you and saying, "Hey, this truck is going to be late." A lot of times that happens hours, if not days later, versus, "Hey, just let the platform tell me what's going on so I don't have to talk to a human." Humans have value in other ways, whether it's consulting, relationship, trust, et cetera. But the technology is the thing that it doesn't have an off switch, right? It doesn't go to bed. It doesn't, it's always working on your behalf. And I think that's a really important thing. And something that I'm really excited to talk to you about is we have all these technologies pre-AI that have been built and designed, and architecture has been designed to solve certain things. But now that AI is coming to life, I'm not saying it's a human. As a matter of fact, I saw a podcast with Mark Andreessen and Joe Rogan. I posted on my LinkedIn. Mark Andreessen is the founder of Andreessen Horowitz. Amazing sort of venture capital organization. He talks with and invests in the brightest minds and companies in the world. And Rogan had him on to talk about AI and the impact of AI. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I'll get into some examples in a second, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about how AI could be used with ScrapGo, or could be used in your industry, or just in general, like what your perspective is on the next generation of technologies like AI.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to say, but I think where AI could be useful is in scrap in general. Could be useful in things like that are stuff that's actually being measured now, the Internet of Things, like uptime for machinery, when it's time to service something, things of that nature. I don't think that in a business like scrap that AI has a place that would fit into a box. I think that there are some things that can be done to help eke out more margin. Because currently I would say, for people who are like auto salvage yards, they're looking at cars coming in and they're making bids on, that type of car based on the engine type and the catalytic converter, and it's like in their mind, they know, or maybe they have a spreadsheet or something, but maybe there is a way for them to quickly figure out, based on their history, what they should pay for it, instead of kind of like off the cuff, or like, hey, I know this guy's been selling me cars, this tow guy, for a long time, or whatever. It's just maybe there is a way to standardize it. I don't know. That's just a off the cuff, take. In our business, trading, I think that there could be some real applications in terms of, order management and, things like that, where maybe supplementing what people do and freeing up their time to do other things that require intuitive sort of thinking, could be very beneficial for us.
That's interesting. I've got a ton of examples I'd love to sort of talk to you about. So Mark Andreessen said a few things that were really interesting. One, he said that AI is actually replacing white collar jobs, not blue collar, and that was actually the reverse of what new technologies are supposed to do. It's he said it's as good as a good lawyer, it's as good as a good doctor. It's using neural networks to understand like all this data. So you talk about let's say optimization or order planning or order management. That's easy. That's like, hey, you've got all this historical data. AI can go out and compute way faster than my mind can compute, way faster than I can use Excel, way faster than I can, bring context in a situation. And I think it can be certainly applied there. My buddies and I, so I'm going to Bandon Dunes on Saturday. I'm so excited. For those that you don't know what Bandon is, it's probably the greatest resort for golfers in the world. Has some 5 courses, all in the top 16 in the U.S., at least public. And we're trying to put together a Ryder Cup format. So we go to Chat GPT. We're like, hey, Chat, give us all the different combinations of teams that you can make, optimized for these 5 things. And literally in 5 seconds, Chat had it done and asked me. It was almost like a puppy dog. Hey, can I do more? And think about it in our world. Like, and you talked about pricing. Like, I just saw a video, a friend of mine, it was a Volvo transformation, sent to me this morning. And what the video was saying is that now AI understands pictures, understands videos, understands the context of everything written. Now, based off of what you feed it, right? Because they have to be trained, the models have to be trained. They can skew one way or the other, which is very scary because you have, a one-way leaning. Think of political sort of arguments. Then AI is going to think that way, and so you need to make sure that it's sort of right in the middle. But when I think about what you just said about pricing out a car or a vehicle, you can use not only historical data, but pictures and, what the current prices are, where the market's going, all these different factors to build AI modeling around, where you don't even do it. You just do a video, it's done, it's priced, and there's no human involvement. And for some people, like jobs, I think about jobs, like jobs will evolve like anything else, but it's also scary for a lot of people that might not add the value that they did before. Like every industry has changed. My dad was in paper and printing. It's one of the reasons I got into tech is because that industry, paper industry, just went like that, right? When everything went digital. And so every industry is going to evolve. I think AI is going to supercharge that evolution, and it's going to continue. It's going to continue faster than it's ever gone before. So, so the scrap, I think scrap is the same. It's just, as an entrepreneur, how do you leverage it now to create models and be in front? Speed is going to win in a lot of industries, and I think AI is that thing to tap into for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's some opportunity there for sure. I don't know exactly what it is, because the question in my mind about AI is, can you trust it? Can you trust what is spit out? I mean, in your example about golf, that like it's not going to put Tiger Woods in one of your foursomes. You know what I mean? Like, that there's 4 guys that so you can trust that information. But if it's bringing new data or new information, where's it getting that stuff from? Is it making it up? I don't know. I think in order for AI to take a hold, and I know there's a ton of excitement around it for sure, because it's that new technology and everybody's so hot on it right now. But I think that there's going to have to be some demonstrated reliability there. But certainly there's ways to automate processes in your current environment, like especially ours. I mean, we do so much stuff with spreadsheets and calculations and whatever. I mean,
Right.
You can program your software to do some of that stuff, but AI might be able to take it to another level.
Yeah, I got scolded this morning. Every Wednesday I do coffee with my wife. I got scolded because my daughter had a project, and I said, let's just give it to Chat GPT. My daughter's 10, and basically said Chat GPT spit it out. And I had to edit some things, right, because it wasn't exactly perfect. But my daughter went right to my mom and said, hey, we're done already. And my wife goes, what do you mean you're done already? I thought you and your dad, were working on this project. She goes, yeah, he just gave it to Chat GPT and we're done in like 5 seconds.
Funny.
And now, like, for me, technology is like the center of what I do. I start thinking about, okay, all right, now how do I use it? How do we use it, in our business? So I'm going to pivot a little bit, but it's awesome. Like, some great thoughts about ScrapGo and the scrap industry. For entrepreneurs, and let's go back to the entrepreneur thing. If you were to give some advice to entrepreneurs that are, or technologists or people starting their business, what are some of the things that you would tell them, going through your journey that might help them get to second base faster?
I mean, don't stop learning, you know?
Yeah.
The second that you think you know everything, you're done. You're toast. The world is passing you by because you don't. And so oftentimes you get people that think they want to be the boss. They might be a great salesperson. They might be a great manager. They might be a great, who knows, forklift operator, whatever it is. They might be great at that one thing, and they think they can be the boss, but there's so much that they don't know.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks that they can just go out and start their own business, and some people can. I mean, they just have that ability to persevere over, the many obstacles that they'll face. But people who think that they have all the answers typically do not. And so,
Right.
that's what I would say. I would say that to new entrepreneurs, people who haven't done it before, just be ready to learn some lessons and take what you've learned and apply it.
Yeah. Yeah. My mind, as you were talking, Dale, started going to this picture of the glacier in the water, like what people see, right? They see this like success, but underneath is like this massive piece of
Sure.
ice that people don't see, and the amount of pain and trial and error and agony and blood, sweat, tears, all those things that go into starting a business. And it's crazy. Like people are like, why would you do that? And it's just so satisfying to build something and be a part of something that actually becomes even not successful. The stuff that you do that's not successful, in my opinion, is just as important or even more than the stuff that you do that is, because you take that learning to the next sort of game. So that's awesome. So we're running to the end of the show, Dale. I guess what are some things that you would want people in the audience to know about ScrapGo, or how you might help them, or a little bit more about you and ScrapGo, and then we'll finish the episode.
So for people who are listening or watching who are in the scrap business and are interested in, maybe finding a new home or just kind of testing the waters, reach out to us. You can go to our website. It's www.scrapgo.com. And you'll see, I mean, you can check out our website. You can feel free to shoot me an email through the website. Somebody will call you back, probably myself, especially if you mention watching this episode. And
Sure.
we'd be more than happy to talk to you, find out a lot about your business, and see where we might be able to help. Typically, we'll get a project to work on that nobody wants to work on, and that is awesome for us. We will pursue that opportunity in a dogged manner to make sure that we can prove ourselves to you, and we want to help your business. We want to help you grow. From a consumer perspective, we're going to, and I say consumer meaning people who are buying scrap and actually using it, as opposed to me and you, Jeff. But we can help you guys supplement your current buy. We're great at what we do in terms of finding scrap that you're not already buying. I know a lot of brokers that are out there, they chum the water in the local market and try and sell it as this different scrap than the local guy is already buying. We do not do that. We take it from one market to the next. We use our expertise and relationships in freight to to really provide value on both ends of the transaction. And drop a follow here for Jeff, and stay tuned for what he's doing next.
Yeah, thanks, Dale. This has been an awesome show, by the way. Thank you for your business. Thank you for joining. For all those that are out there listening and watching, thanks to Dale Turken. Thanks to his team for being great with us, great with our teams. I'm Jeff D'Angelo. You've just listened to episode 2 of the Just Build It podcast.